Hello and welcome to Celtic State of Mind. My name is Laura Bradburn and I am joined. It's just me and thee today, Brian.
Just the two of us.
I
That's
don't
it.
know. We can
Dynamic
make it
duo.
if we try.
Gruesome
Um,
twosome. Whatever sort of Laurel and Hardy, any sort of Jack and Victor, any sort of combination.
also known as the two that couldn't get to Madrid this week, I think is the top and bottom of it. But
True, true.
nevertheless, nice way to spend a Friday with all you lovely viewers and listeners. Get your comments in. We'll definitely need your help rather than try to go around four people like we were last week. That was a bit of a change up for the books, but we've never been short of a word, have we, Brian?
No, it's not an accusation that's ever been levelled at me that I don't talk enough.
I'm
I'm
sure.
getting told the opposite, get told to shut
I'm,
it. So
I'm sure we'll manage to fill an hour talking about Celtic. We always do. How correct we are, or how informed we are about any of those things that we say, it remains to be seen. But we'll talk nonetheless. Plenty to discuss. You were just talking about before we came on air that the AGM is happening as we speak, so we won't be able to keep up to date with that while we are entertaining all the lovely folks in the comments. But if you've got any particular gems and you want to comment, and we'll bring them up and keep everybody informed while they're watching us, that would be very, very helpful. Plenty to talk about, like I said, between now and the shutdown for the World Cup. Only 3 matches left until that happens, which is mental. But before we look ahead, we have to look back. It's been pulled apart ad nauseum, but as always on a Friday, we still like to have our wee say. What was your take on the week's events, Brian? And by that I mean the game at the Bernabeu.
So it's so strange. If I say to you right now, we played really well, never took our chances, and get beat. What game am I describing?
Pretty much every single one.
Is the same. You know, it's almost the same thing. But the reality is, that's kind of how it's been, and it's the weirdest feeling. So I went into this local supporters club. Shout out for the Swindon Shamrocks. And it was still a really good atmosphere. Everybody was enjoying it. Obviously, there were shouts when the goals were going in, but there was also acknowledgement of how well we were playing. And then we got a squad, we were all up to, and it was good. And then you sort of go, how do you feel about the campaign? And it's like, well, we never won a game, so on paper, it's bad. However, the performances were class, and at times we really did look the part. You know, and it's the same old story. If Kyogo takes his chance, if Juranovic scores a penalty, Jota scores at the end anyway, that could have been 3. So 5-3 he still conceded 5 goals. One was a shady penalty. You know, the first goal penalty was a stone waller. Big Jens is I think he's been unlucky, to be fair, because the ball bounces such a weird direction. Yeah. But it is a handball, right? Second one's never a penalty in a million years.
No.
You can watch it 1,000 times. It's never a penalty.
Well, this is something I wanted to ask you, because it was a point I raised in the post-match coverage during the week. Is I sometimes wonder if we're experiencing like an unintended consequence of VAR, that actually we're having to scrutinise the rules of the game a lot more because, you know, things are getting stopped and replayed and replayed. I don't know if you asked anybody in the comments, if you asked us, if you asked anybody in the AXOM group chat to define exactly what the handball is right now, that they would be able to do it.
No, but this is the problem with VAR, is it's still reliant on somebody else's opinion. Everything's always subjective. What I've noticed with VAR is, and we'll talk about VAR in Scotland as well, because that's a separate issue, because that's a whole different can of worms, right? that's bizarre world. But
we got a penalty. We got a penalty.
We did get a penalty. That was a bit American in itself, but and it always seems that as soon as they check the screen, they reverse the decision. So you almost always know what's going to happen. But with something like that handball, so in my understanding, and obviously not being a ref, thankfully, but it has to go hand to ball, right? So you have to be blocking it, and it has to be so it's not a goal scoring chance, right? Because it's going wide anyway. He looks like he's pulling back. As he's pulling back, you can't pull back and keep your arms like that.
Yeah.
Because that's insanity. It defies the laws of physics. So as he's pulling back, it hits his arm. That can't be a penalty. Like, in any common sense, but has his arm physically touched the ball? Yes. So it's how do you define that? And I think a common sense approach would be good. But the fact that it went to VAR and you think, surely not. And as soon as I saw it going over the referee, I thought that's actually it. Nice to see a female referee, right enough, in a Champions League game. I thought that was good to see. I think it's the first time I've seen it, but I know there's been 4 officials, so that was a really good step in the right direction.
True equality is disliking the ref no matter what their gender is.
Aye. She was still rotten, but just congratulations to anyone. In terms of just our own VR before we get back to the Madrid game, in terms of, Scotland, so I wasn't here for the Hearts game, I missed it. I said when VR was coming in, it just gives Scottish referees 2 chances to get it wrong, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And it's, at what point do you agree where, at what point do they have to check it? Because I know in the game against Hearts, it was an offside, or I think it was a handball decision we appealed for, and the ref just went, no, it's no. So at what point do they have to check? I mean, it's because surely if you're absolutely convinced, why would you check? But if they're always checking, do you need to check everything, right? Surely. So it's a bit cool, you need to check it.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because I was actually listening to Jamie Carragher and Gary Neville talking. Gary Redknapp, I nearly said Gary Neville talking about that. So they do obviously the co-commentary for Sky Sports, and I didn't know this, but apparently they have in their ear what is being said at the central place, wherever it is in England that the VAR is happening. So when they're commentating and you hear them say something like, oh, I think that's maybe going to get given as a penalty, when the referee's walking over to the monitor, it's because they actually know it is going to get given as a penalty. So basically the referee is getting fed all this information, and that's why when they walk over to the monitor, usually it's to overturn a decision, because they're getting fed all this stuff in their ear as they're walking over, going, basically, I personally think the monitor thing is a bit of a performative thing to actually allow them to give them the time to talk to them a little bit. Yeah,
probably for aesthetics as well, so the sort of people can see, and it's almost like, I suppose, taking that debate out of it, but it doesn't. I think as well, we'll see, so I'll slightly defend VAR as well, because I think the issues are the rules themselves and interpretation of the rules, as opposed to VAR itself. Like, I saw an offside, I can't remember what game it was, and it was like the front of his boot. So because that guy had size 12 feet and the defender had size 6 feet, he's offside. And it's like, well, that, surely not. Like, at some point you've got to say that isn't right. But if any party, if you got a big giant note, if Ibrahimovic is running through and goal and his nose is sticking offside, he's offside. But it's ridiculous, right? So I think as well, as much as I'm not, especially in Scotland, I'm not convinced of the referee's ability at all. I think it's the understanding of the rules, and that lack of clarity is probably more of an issue in general.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that about the foot being offside. I've got 2 different size feet, so if my right foot was forward, I wouldn't be offside. If my left foot was forward, I would be offside. So
there you go.
So there you go.
That just takes you outside the ring you're playing on, Laura.
I'll need to hop on my right foot or something, and that will stay me on side or something like that. I don't know.
Just going back to the Madrid game, like, the other thing you always need to think about is look at the quality they had in display. I mean, they're other than 2 penalties, their goals were brilliant. Like, Valverde's was absolutely tremendous.
He's actually a player. I hadn't seen an awful lot of Real Madrid in the past 18 months, 2 years or whatever, and he was a player it wasn't really on my radar until these games, and I think he's been absolutely amazing.
It was exceptional, and that's the thing as well. Sometimes you just have to say, do you know what? They're just an absolutely better team. We got battered and we move on from it. But I really liked the reaction for the fans, sort of applauding the players, and I think that's indicative of people's feelings about the performances this season in Europe. And I think people are so confident in Ange's ability in the way he sort of framed it, because he's never made an excuse. He doesn't do it. It's not his nature. And he said, this is going to take time. and he used Shakhtar as an example. So they're in the Champions League every year, and the varying degrees of success, but they've gradually got better.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? They might be maybe not as good one year, be a bit better the next, but in general, they compete. He's like, but that didn't happen the first time they were ever in it. He says, we've been out it for so long, you need to get there every season and sort of progressing. I think that's right. And I think, you know, he wouldn't admit it. I don't think he would ever throw anybody under the bus, but there's obviously players there. He's still, you're not where you need to be, or you might not get to that level. And where we kind of criticise the players too much, for us to move on, there will have to be changes, I reckon. And I think Ange knows that, and I think that'll go into his thinking. So it'll be a big learning experience for him as well, which I think is something he seems to thrive on. So it's hard to, you can find as many negatives as you want, but ultimately, I've never seen a European campaign where I've been so conflicted and enjoyed it so much despite the winning. So it's such a strange thing to digest.
Yeah. It is a strange one. I think I'm of the same. Like, I almost forget that we only got 2 points out of 6 games, because I did enjoy the games and I did enjoy the way that we played and the fact that we took it to people, which was good. And that thing that you said about Ange learning from it, you know, he's a funny character at times, because he obviously keeps his cards close to his chest, to the point where sometimes I think he just outright lies when he answers questions, because like somebody asked him, what have you learned from this campaign? And he said, nothing I didn't already know. Now, I don't believe that for a second. I'm not saying he learned anything from a footballing perspective that he didn't already know, but he certainly, as you hinted at, I'm sure he learned a lot about players that he maybe thought had the ability to play at that level who maybe don't, or are much further away from that level than he thought they were. Because I, for one, learned that lesson about some of the players as well. Like, so I'm sure he did, because you know, he's the one that brought them into the club in the first place. So it'd be interesting to see. Put it this way, with no European football for the rest of the season, whether that accelerates the turnover process is something we'll get onto in the strapline and a little bit later in the show, about whether the departures will be coming thick and fast, or whether they will be coming in the summer. But before we go into that, we'll just get some comments coming up from people. Ryan Kelly says, afternoon Friday AXOM crew, just the two of us, but hopefully that's all right for you. And I've got to say, Brian, you're setting off the chat something awful today. The underwater cabbage salesman says, ooh la la, Brian entering Glasgow's best jumper competition. And Paddy Lavery says, is Brian going for a job interview? I don't know if you've been dressed.
Going to court. No, I'll certainly lose the best jumper competition to Laura today. Laura's got
I've got a flash jumper on.
A flash jumper on. Now, we're not saying Laura's flashing on AXOM, just for our audio listeners. She's wearing a flash jumper on AXOM.
I am fully clothed.
It's not that type of show.
No, nobody would want to see that, believe me. But listen, the Champions League chat has been done to death. We've both been involved in it. I've said everything that I feel like I want to say about what we have and haven't done and where I want us to be. But I guess before we move on, just a summary from you about the group stage in general. Do you feel like we will be better equipped going into next year to handle it better, or do you think we're still a few years away from getting to a stage where we can be that kind of, you know, regular force in the Champions League?
So I think it was also going to take a while. I think we knew that at the start. I think we probably got a bit. I mean, I'm the most excitable man alive. I thought I think we're going to win every single game. I was convinced we'd win. I said we should have Liverpool would beat them. I'm glad we haven't. So I'm always excited and always have that, and I think that's part of the beauty. I watching Celtic is they're always sort of feel there's something special there, and I think Ange had sort of, certainly opposed to last season, or along with last season, he raised expectations to such an extent. So that last season I wasn't even sure we'd win the league. At the start of the season I thought it might be too long a journey for us to build up to that. Ange smashed it. So I've got to take that rationale to Europe and say, you know, we performed really, really well, which I think we did. And it's not a cop-out to say that. It's no, you know, it's not that you're happy with just performing well and getting battered, but you look at the chances we created. I mean, if things go a different way, a wee bit of luck goes our way. We spoke about it before. I mean, Leipzig were absolutely awful at the start of the campaign.
Yeah.
And then they changed manager and were brilliant. Now, if we'd have got them as the first game, the draw would have been slightly different in terms of the fixtures. How different could it have been? If we take a couple of chances, you don't know if we'd played Red Bull and then won in Shakhtar, you could be 6 points 2 games in. So all these different things could have happened. And I think that's why next season in Champions League, you have to account for that as well. Although we may improve, it may be the case we get a really, really tough draw. And, the fixtures don't fall away, we get injuries. Because the other thing as well is, we've lost our captain and arguably our most influential player for this camp, and that's going to hurt any team. We also lost Shota, who's probably our best player, or certainly that player that you think could have really shown in that stage. So there's loads of points to take. I think we'll be better. I think, as you say, I think there's no way Ange's watched that and went, yeah, we're fine. I know he knows there's got to be things to improve on. And while it's no negative to say some players never quite measured up the way we wanted, I think it's positive to see that there was a lot of players that really stepped up.
Yeah.
And actually were really good. I thought Jens, generally, obviously get the handball the other night, but I think generally he's had a really good European campaign, if I'm honest. And I think, considering he didn't come with a lot of fanfare and wasn't a huge superstar in the game, I think that's really good. I think O'Reilly, generally speaking, he's been very, very good, especially playing a kind of unfamiliar role as well.
Yeah.
We spoke about Hatate, who I always compare to Samaras, because he's either brilliant or terrible, but on the one game. But he's when he's good, he's so good, you can never not have him.
Yeah.
And some of his range of passing in Europe's absolutely scandalous. It's brilliant. And then a 5-year pass just goes astray. It's such a weird... But again, these guys will improve as well, I think, because I think Yakimakis, Juranovic, Kyogo and Hart aside, we're a very young side. And that's something to bear in mind as well.
Yeah. We talked about that after the match, actually, the other night, and I'll get your thoughts on it in a second. When we talk about potential January exits, the idea of stopgap players and the fact that we do certainly have some of those in the squad and that we'll probably be looking to move them on and get replacements, but we'll get into that. But you just reminded me of something that I wanted to talk about before we left the Real Madrid game. I've been thinking about it over and over, and on the night of the match, I was really pleased for him, but that reaction from Jota, it was pure joy. I know that, but it was so strange in the context of the match that he was so overjoyed at scoring that goal. What was your reaction to that?
Well, I was doing cartwheels at the time. I was running about the pub, shouting, fiddling strangers, and because obviously, you're not hiding, right? You're going, you get to that point, you're going, oh, well, let's just get through the game now and see. And he scores that goal and the whole place cheers. And it was a weird feeling, but it was a brilliant goal. And he's a young guy that scored a free kick in the Champions League in Real Madrid's ground. You can't be excited about that. Don't get me wrong, I always think it's funny, there was a game recently with Celtic, and I think we were winning 3-0, and one of the opposition players scored and then silenced the fans as if it's like you're still getting beat. You're not shutting the crowd up 10 minutes if you get beat 3-0. It's like
I know, but there's also a bit of me that goes, if I had the chance to silence a crowd, I would do it.
That's the point. And if I was shot and I scored in the Champions League and the Bernabeu, of course you would celebrate it, and I think it was almost, there was a sort of meta quality, because the theme of the campaign's almost been we can't score goals. Despite scoring for fun domestically, we've been lacking in Europe, and then we miss a penalty, miss a couple of sitters, but finally we score one when we're 5-0 down. And there was something kind of, I don't know, I wouldn't say funny, but it was sort of indicative of the campaign. So no, listen, I was really happy with him. I understand why he celebrated that way. I'd have done the same. You can't take that young guy, can't take that away from him. And as I say, we were jumping about as if we'd won the game. So, it's just one of those things. It was just nice to see.
Yeah, there's a lot of us probably never thought we would see, and probably never will again see, Celtic score at the Bernabeu, regardless of the context of it. So that in itself was was worth it. Just an interesting point coming up from Derek Smith there, watching us on YouTube. If you are watching on YouTube, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. I think we're only a little bit away from 20,000 subscribers, which is absolutely amazing. So if you can help us get there, some ridiculous percentage of people that watch these videos aren't subscribed to the channel, so it would be a massive help if you could subscribe and help us reach people. But Derek Smith says, guaranteed place for the World Cup, perhaps a starting place in the first team. This is obviously referring to the fact Jota scored that free kick not long after finding out he was in the provisional squad for the Portugal team going to the World Cup. Do you think there was any element of his reaction that considered that fact? You know, the fact that we are so close to the World Cup, it's going to take wee things like that for somebody on the edge of the provisional squad to maybe push themselves into the manager's thoughts. Has he maybe thought, if I can prove myself a threat on set pieces and that kind of thing, that there's maybe that'll give me the edge over somebody else to get into that final 23-man squad?
I don't know if it's been as specific as that. I would imagine it'd been his thoughts. Obviously, if I can play well, you know, it might just edge me. And every player's going to be the same, but I suspect his priority was probably go and see if he can, because he seems to be one of those guys that, you know, you saw his reaction when he scored against Livingston, and he came back and he was right up at the fans, and he just loved it. And I think he's one of those guys that really got into the club. So I think probably his priority would have been trying to reward the support the team have had. And I think they seem a kind of like-minded group of lads and a nice group of guys as well. So I think that would be his first priority. And obviously, huge boost for the guy getting into the Portuguese national team if he starts or even comes off the bench, because it's a very talented squad. And I think, again, it you know, taking it back to a Celtic perspective, it really shows that we can get these guys and give them a platform. So if people are looking at Jota, and he, you know, could potentially be a Portuguese international through playing for Celtic, then that's encouraging younger guys to come and go, right, let's go. I mean, the World Cup itself is a different topic, but it would be good for me also. You want to support him and make sure he does well and comes back safe.
Yeah, the last time I saw a Celtic player taken to the field for the Portuguese national team was my hero, George Cadet, who I think was in the Euro '96 squad for Portugal, but my timelines might be all wrong there. But it's just it's a little bit of nostalgia that I'm quite glad to see, and equally impressive hair as well, which is good.
He's here, top drawer.
It's absolutely quite the Barnet, we'll put it that way. We'll move on to the strapline there. Ange doesn't fear Celtic departures, but would January be too soon? I think from what I remember of what Ange was saying, he doesn't fear departures in terms of he doesn't fear the squad getting picked off by the bigger teams, and that may well be the case. But as I touched on earlier, there is definitely an idea or there's solid evidence to suggest that some of the players who are at the club just now will not be of the correct calibre to take us to the next level. Do you see Ange starting to make those changes as soon as January, or do you think, given that we know he's quite meticulous and plans quite a lot in advance, that he will keep things as they are for January and look to make more more changes in the summer?
I suppose it depends where he sees as a priority. I think there's rumours that the Japanese guys coming in, left centre back, 22 apparently that's all but done. And I imagine January's a good time because of how their season works. So that's probably the reason why he's coming in. And then it could mean that somebody's leaving, because it's unlikely. I don't think he'll just keep adding numbers to the squad. I think he want quality.
I think if he comes in, then unfortunately Stephen Welsh's days are probably numbered.
You would imagine so. You'd imagine so. I could be wrong about that. And I like Stephen Welsh, so you know, it'd be sorry if he does go, but he was linked with a few Italian teams and been sniffing about in the past few transfer windows, and I reckon you probably get decent money for him. I suspect. So what's interesting about this, in a normal season, I would say January probably would be too soon. But given we've not got Europe after January, and given the fact it's the World Cup before, so if any of the guys that are playing at international do well, their value will be highest in January. So you've got to say Juranovic. There was rumours of him leaving in the summer, maybe wanting to play on for the Champions League to get into the World Cup. Now we're out of the Champions League. By January, the World Cup will be done. would he be going if he's got a high price on him? I suspect you could probably accept a decent offer from him because you've got Ralston, and then I'm sure Ange's planning to have somebody come in is either backup or to take his place. So I think there'll be a lot of planning going on. Ange seems to be a guy who he's always had that brilliant attitude that I really like, and I'm never sure it was just sort of being a bit, I don't know, sort of puffing your chest out. But he's always sort of said, "I'm never going to try and convince players to come to Celtic or to stay at Celtic. If you're not happy at Celtic, playing at that crowd, playing at this level, I don't know what's going to make you happy." Yeah. And I don't know if that's a bit of fan service or that's how he sees it. Because I get the impression if somebody says, you know, I want to leave, I reckon they'll go. And I think he'll have a plan in his mind of this is who I'd like to come in to replace him. And I also think that I don't get the impression he plays favourites either.
No.
So I think if there's a player who's been doing well, but there's a player available who's better, or he thinks they're going to add more, I suspect he'll say, look, they're coming in, you either need to step up or go. So I think there's a ruthless side to Ange that maybe we don't see in regard to player transfers. But I think in terms of the question about January, it's certainly the case that the World Cup's going to affect that. And if there's big performers like that, you'll see more movement in January than you normally would. Because normally it's not a huge sort of amount of transfers in January. It's a kind of funny window.
Yeah, it's more often reserved for panic buys and covering injuries and that kind of thing. So
John Joe Kenny's the world coming in.
Oh, there's a list as long as your arm if you want to go down that road. My goodness. But yeah, no, I think you're right about the ruthless side to Ange. I think as much as we all like him and we can all see the humour in some of the stuff that he says, there definitely is that ruthless side to him. I remember watching an interview not long after he joined where it was said that he apparently, I think it was a friend of his, I can't remember if it was his best man or something like that at his wedding but anyway, a very close friend of his who was a coach in a team that he was managing, and he ended up after a few months saying, listen, it's not working, you're going to have to sling your hook, basically. So so there's definitely that cutthroat attitude there when it's necessary, and I think he will show that if needs be. I think, like, we all know the players that aren't up to scratch and the players that could be moved on, but it will remain to be seen when that happens.
I think it also depends on I know he's saying doesn't fear departures, but I think it depends on the player himself. So if you're using by Giacomakis, for example, I love him, right? I think he's class. I love him when he plays. But he is 27. And if someone comes in with 12 to 15 million for him, you take it.
Yeah. Right? And he also doesn't, as much as I like him, he doesn't strike me as the type who would be afraid to say, no, I want to go to the bigger club. Like, I want to go to the Premier League or whatever.
And I think that's
out for themselves.
That's the case, right? So see something that comes in, I would take that amount from him because I think you could replace him. Like, I think there'll be, but like a Matt O'Reilly or a Hatate, it's harder to replace because what they have that our other midfielders, Callum McGregor aside, don't have is a real strong athleticism, easy for me to say, where they can bound about, they've got that energy, they've got that clever range of passing, they've got so much potential for their age as well. So that's a different conversation. Because if someone offers you 15 million for Matt O'Reilly, you need to tell them where to go.
Yeah. And also the advantage with O'Reilly and Hatate there is, as much as you said about Giacomakis being 27, O'Reilly and Hatate have got time on their side. You can say to them, give us another year, give us another 18 months and you'll get your move and you'll still be young enough to have an impact wherever you go.
Again, so your value is going to change. So you need all the guys that are really hard to replace. And I think like O'Reilly, Hatate, McGregor certainly, although I don't see him going anywhere. Carter Vickers, they're, almost the bedrock of the team at the moment. And the drop-off when they're not playing so strong, if they go, that will have a much bigger effect. Whereas, there are some players that, as much as we love them and they're good, you could probably see being replaced.
It's definitely going to be interesting. I think we've talked about it on a couple of bulletins now. Just everything that you think you know about the January transfer window, like you said, is up in the air because of the World Cup. It's almost going to feel a bit like a summer frenzy because we could all name players who've built their careers or earned a massive move off the back of a good World Cup performance. regardless of whether they go on to be successful in the rest of their careers or whatever. But it will just be really interesting to see how this unprecedented World Cup in the middle of a domestic season affects everything: transfers, momentum, fatigue, and player fitness, and all that kind of stuff. It's just I think it's going to blow the gates wide open as far as trophies and stuff like that on a European level are concerned. It's going to be certainly going to be interesting to watch. Just looking ahead before we get to the World Cup, we've got 3 fixtures left. We've got Dundee United at home at 3 o'clock tomorrow, 3 o'clock on a Saturday. What would you believe it? Then we've got Wednesday the 9th of November at 7:45. We're going to Motherwell, and then Saturday the 12th of November we've got Ross County at home. None of those teams, particularly when they come to Celtic Park, strike an awful lot of fear into me. Are you expecting 9 out of 9 as far as those 3 games are concerned, or would you be happy if we managed to get 2 wins and a draw? What's the target for you for these last 3 games before the shutdown?
I think it's certainly a 9 out of 9. I think we need to make sure we're at least the 4-point gap still. I think because the World Cup will present us with a chance to sort of rest and recuperate and get a couple of weeks training in and get any squad that are feeling a bit leggy or a bit, carrying a few knocks. We should be entering in January, irrespective of transfers, with a good head of steam and sort of raring to go. And the 3 results, I think, are essential to that. I think if we dropped any points before January, I think that would put a slight damper on it. And I think that's something we want to avoid. What will be interesting is, and again, if there is plans in place for January, it might be telling in terms of who starts every game or who comes on as subs or what some of the thoughts are about players leaving. Because there is, I was having a conversation on the group chat about why maybe if you're against the game at Livingston, where with the game in hand we're pretty comfortable, why for the last 10 minutes no bring on, Boston Lowell or Rocco Vata or guys like that and just give him a run out. It would be interesting to see guys like that maybe get a wee appearance, or if he's going to stick with his sort of tried and tested. It'll also be interesting to see if he starts playing Abelgard.
Yeah.
At the same time, he's not really played him, and I know he didn't have a pre-season, he's been getting up to speed, but I still think as good as O'Reilly's been in the deeper role, what you get from him in that role, you lose going forward, because there's nobody as good as him linking the play.
And I think as good as O'Reilly is at it, from what I've seen of Abelgard, he's certainly much a more natural fit there.
So it'll be interesting if he starts. If he doesn't starting games when now it's domestic concerns, I would be quizzing when he's ever going to appear. And if you're a player and you've been brought in to play that position and an attacking midfielder's fill in for you when you're fit, you're going to start to think, have I got a future here? What's the gig? So that would be interesting to see. Eddie Gucci, a guy that I've been fairly nonplussed about traditionally, eventually see if he starts. Again, he's been on the bench a few times and not featured.
Yeah.
So this idea of, well, he's not been fit, it's not fair to judge him. If he's on the squad and he's still not playing, it might be time to think about judging, and maybe he could go as well. So it'll be really interesting to see. And I think if you start playing certain players dropped or players getting a wee chance, that might give you an indication of where he's thinking is for January. But then saying that, how many times do you try and predict Postecoglou's team selection? And it's almost always wrong.
Listen, I was on the match coverage for the Livingston game saying that I thought it was the wrong choice to put Kyogo up top. It should have been Giacomakis, and then Kyogo scores within 9 minits. So
no, I think me and Jim said that on the Friday as well. And he immediately get wins. But do you know what? See if everything I say is wrong about Celtic, but it means we win. I'm pretty comfortable with that, to be honest.
Well, exactly. My pride takes second place to Celtic winning football matches, that's for sure. Just as an aside before we move on to the next topic, just because you brought him up, I'd love to get your thoughts on this, just because it's a thought that's always gone through my head about players. It's happened about Mikey Johnson. It's happened about various other players. Derek Riordan was another one. Injury-prone players. Where do you think the line is between yeah, would be great for us if he was fully fit, or if we could stop him getting injured, and acknowledging the fact that actually maybe being injury prone is part of his makeup, and actually you need to say, well, if that is part of his makeup, he's no any use to us, kind of thing. Basically, what I'm saying as well is, how much longer do you give Ideguchi? I guess the answer is how long's a piece of string, but it's just an interesting conversation point that's all I've always wanted to ask somebody, and you're the unfortunate person that's landed with a question.
No, it's no problem at all. So again, if you look at Ideguchi as an example, personally speaking, I don't. People keep defending him, keep telling me he's great. I've not seen any of it, so I don't know what he offers. I'm sure he's a lovely guy and a really good human being, and I'm sure he's a very good footballer, but I don't see what he's to the squad. So if you've had him for a year now, isn't it? Because he came in last January.
Yeah.
Had him for a year now. He's played what, 3 games, something like that. Started 3 or 4 games. So you think he's probably not going to be the answer, right? Again, happy to be wrong. If he comes on and starts playing, he's a worldie. Fantastic, I'm over the moon. In terms of injury-prone players, I think it depends on what they're coming in for. So, well, before we get to that, first of all, remember John Hartson was labelled injury-prone.
Yes.
And look at care he had. So you can't always take it at face value. It depends on the player. It depends on the injuries. If someone's coming to be a starter, so say you sign somebody for a couple of million, and you go, right, they're going to be a top player if they're fit, that would be a concern for me, because I think, well, if they're not fit, what happens? Whereas if it's somebody who is an experienced player but has struggled with injuries, but there's someone that's going to boost the squad as opposed to be like a sort of main player, what do you call it, a marquee signing, I'm sort of more all right with that. I can sort of live with it if we go, do you know what, if we get him fit, he's a great player. If we don't get him fit and it's not worked out, it's not going to be hugely detrimental to the team. So that's kind of my logic. As I say, if, you know, we're willing to sign a new striker and we say, well, he's been injured for 8 months at the past 2 seasons, but when he's fit, he's really good. Would that be my concern for me, if he's going to be your out and out striker for the season? But if he's
fit Lee Griffiths gets you 40 goals a season.
Aye. That if he comes in, it's cover. I can sort of live with that. And I think one of the things as well about being injury prone, some players are just really unlucky in a certain space of time. And they just need that. I mean, look at Craig Gordon. I know people don't like us talking about Craig Gordon anymore because he doesn't play for Celtic. But you know, he was at the game for 2 full years, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And he eventually came back, and there was questions at the time. And then he, again, regardless of what people say, he was a great servant for Celtic. He done a good job. So again, it all depends on the individual. I think it's quite a broad topic. If you talk about Mikey Johnson, what has his injury rate been like in Portugal?
I don't know. I don't know, and I would be interested to know, because apparently he's making quite a good go of it over there, and I wonder, I mean, this is me speculating completely off the top of my head, because if there's one thing I'm not, it's a regular viewer of Vitória Guimarães games. But I wonder.
You should be.
Believe me, I'm sure Colin will be watching them or something. I don't know, but I just wonder if perhaps, knowing the little bit that I do about the game on the continent, whether the game there suits him better, whether he maybe gets a little bit more time on the ball, a little bit less heavy challenges, and it's just a little bit less hectic. And that's not me degrading the guy in any way. It's just people are built differently, and maybe he's gone over there and thought, oh no, actually I can have a good career and not be worried about somebody clattering into me every 2 seconds, and actually like still be a footballer. Because I definitely think in his case, although you mentioned the unfortunate timeline for some players, I think in his case he's definitely what you would call an injury-prone player, certainly in Scotland anyway. And I'd just be interested, like you said, to know what his injury proneness is in a different environment, because
that's a huge factor of how you assess people as well, isn't it? Because you know, I mean, look at Dembele when he was there, and again, people were crying out for him to start. Again, I wasn't one of those people really, and he, anything he played, if he got a tackle, he was getting injured. Whereas he did really well in he's France now, isn't he?
Yeah,
he's in France now, so that league might suit him better. it might be the way we train just doesn't suit certain players. Some people are like great trainers, you know, they're maybe nearly naturally really fit and they're better on the park, but training is maybe a bit too intense and they pick up wee niggling things. It doesn't help them. Some people.
The other thing I wondered about was the warmer weather. You know, there's a reason why we go to warm weather training camps. Maybe that maybe that agrees with my. I would agree with me better. Well, maybe not for running about for 90 minutes playing football, but
I could. I was not going about for 90 minutes doing anything. So that's irrelevant. And I don't know about. I mean, I'd love to play in warm weather, but I'd probably burst into flames like a vampire as soon as I stepped into the house.
Oh no, I don't.
My wee peely wally complexion, as my ma says, probably wouldn't hold up.
I don't envy those players as air conditions as the stadiums will be in Doha. I don't envy them one bit. Try to get 90 minutes out themselves, but we'll hopefully see the best of it nonetheless. Looking ahead again at the games in a little bit more detail, obviously Dundee United and Ross County are bottom of the league, so hopefully you would think that victories over them would be relatively straightforward, especially with those two games being at home. What kind of a hoodoo does Motherwell give you having to go away to Fir Park like that? Is that a place that you are particularly anxious about, or if you get good memories of it from years gone by?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just laughing at hoodoo. It's such a good way to describe something. Because I live down south, whenever I hear phrases like that, I forget. As soon as I say it, people think I'm insane. I say something on night about somebody being clatty. I went, oh, they're clatty. And they say, what? Just looking at me insane. Anyway, that's an aside, sorry. Dundee United and Ross County. So I felt we'd have strolled through St Mirren as well.
Yeah,
so
well,
there's always that element of let's just wait and see, because on paper it's been proven this season already doesn't always work. In theory, we should have any problems. I think they're kind of fighting the relegation battle already. I'm surprised at Ross County actually. I thought they'd been all right. They were pretty decent last season.
They seem to be one of these strange clubs that always give us bother, but other than that, seem to perform quite poorly. It's a strange one, but yeah, I was surprised to see when I was looking ahead that they are bottom of the table, because like you say, anytime I've seen them, they've looked as if they've been doing pretty decent. So it's a strange one.
And Dundee United as well. It's like, you know, their squad's pretty good, but they really underperformed. So it could be the case. I mean, Stephen Fletcher, he's getting on, but he's still a good player. And, you know, free kicks into the box could always have a wee hiccup. So you always need to legislate for that. I do expect us to win, but...
needs to give up the man bun, but...
That's not great. That's not... I don't know if you make a math fashion sense, so I'm not going to...
This might sound like the most sexist thing in the world, right? But as a I know I don't have to have my hair long. I can cut it if I want, but social convention is that women have long hair. Why, as a guy, would you want to have long hair? It's so much more difficult to look after. Like, I don't get that.
I'll be honest. See, if I grew my hair long, I'd look like Warwick Davis in Willow, right? I'd look insane. So it's the only reason, because I'd love to have big flowing locks and be all cracking and incontinental looking, but sadly it's not for me. I always look at remember Pirlo is one of my all-time favourite players.
Oh my God, what a guy.
What a guy, right? And what I would describe as stoating hair, right? It was absolutely top draw. But he could pull it off because he was a big Italian footballer. If I was walking into the shops with my hair like that, chances are that something terrible would happen. So I think each to their own with that. Some people really rock it, some people not.
Pirlo is one of those ones I would happily, if anybody wants to get me a Secret Santa, get me a calendar of just Pirlo for 12 months. Like, you know how like Cliff Richard washing the headlamps on a massive car or something like that? Just swap Cliff Richard for Pirlo, and I'm done.
But if you're out there, Pirlo, when your agent's watching this, you give me a quid washing headlights in cars. I don't know I'm not sure where the Cliff Richard thing came from. That probably says more about you than it does about him, to be honest.
No, I have a weirdly specific knowledge of Cliff Richard calendars because my brother gets it as a joke for my mum every Christmas because she despises Cliff Richard, but we'll not go into that.
Right.
Anyway,
that's fair.
back
Cliff
to the
Richard
football.
calendars aside.
Cliff Richard calendars aside. Listen, I've been trying to look at the context of the rest of this season based on the fact that, like you said, we're not in Europe anymore. We're hopefully going to have a relatively clean run at the second half of the season, as are Rangers because of their performance in Europe as well. Is that going to be a help or a hindrance to us, do you think? Because you know how there's always conversations about momentum and keeping up momentum and keeping winning games and it becoming a habit. Or do you think it'll actually help us to have a little bit more free time given the intensity of what Ange likes to do on the training pitch and stuff like that?
So I suppose that there's two ways of looking at it. I mean, I don't think, regardless of what happens across the city, it affects how we go about our business. But in terms of maybe how they're going to be, in theory, you would think, you know, a team like theirs would, having been battered in Europe, would want to prove a point and get riled up and try and go for glory. But there's real question marks over their mentality. I mean, you go from Europa League final to the worst Champions League team ever in the space of months. I mean, it's quite damning. Of course, you can never write them off. And if you do that, you're always going to get a slap. But I think that we'll just power on. And I think, you know, you saw the improvement from January to the end of the season last season. We just got better as that went on. And you know, Ange, I don't know how he does it or what the plan is, but he's always said we will get better as the season goes on. So if you look at that in the context of this season, it's frightening to think us improving domestically, because domestically, against St Mirren aside, we've looked very comfortable.
Yeah.
You know, we have, and I think if we keep getting better, it doesn't really matter what anyone else does. Of course, if they have an absolute collapse, which, you know, it's really interesting what they're going to do, because you don't know what version is going to appear. But if they have the collapse, then obviously it makes it easier for us. But I think Ange and the squad thrive in the challenge, and I think they want to just keep doing it. And I think they'd be thinking, right, we know we can do this domestically, but how do we keep going to the point where we're prepared for next season? How do we get those energy levels better? How do we keep that intensity for full 90 minutes all the time when we've got the ball? Because that's a harder test. You know, if you've got the ball for, you know, 70% of the game, you're not running as much. So it's easier to press. When you don't have it, it's harder. So they're going to have to find a way of building those reserves, so when it does happen, they can do it. So I don't want to say it's going to be a straightforward end to the season, because I've always got that horrible fear we don't win the league or it goes wrong. But I'm so confident that we're going to do well. I just think Ange's programmed the players to such a strong winning mentality. And I think our bravery as well. I think, you know, one of the things that I never mentioned, but in Europe, although we get beat, we were very brave in the ball. You know, I don't think the players had. I don't think I recall a game, and somebody will correct me if I'm wrong, where the players looked as if they were hiding or they didn't want to pass or they gave up the goal. They were playing their football. And that's a massive, massive bonus to their character.
Well, that was another thing I wanted to ask you about, because we were having a discussion during the games, talking about the fact that, you know, if you're going to lose to Real Madrid anyway, I personally would rather lose 5-1 having really given it a go than lose.
You go down swinging. There's no point in standing there and getting a tanking and or hiding for 90 minutes and then they score anyway. You're not doing it. What are you learning from that?
Yeah. Well, that's what I was going to ask you. Is it naive to take that approach, do you think? Is Ange being naive, apparently not changing his stance, or do you think that's something that as Celtic supporters we just have to get behind and we get as far as we get with it?
So it depends again how you look at it. If you are Motherwell, right, and you try to play that way and you go that all attacking, you know you're probably going to get battered if you come to Celtic Park, right? But the players are only ever going to improve if they keep doing it. And the chances are if they sit in, they're going to get battered. So you apply that logic to us in Europe. If we could, if sitting behind the ball, 10 men behind the ball and hoping to ring out a victory would guarantee you a victory, we'd win the Champions League doing it.
Yeah.
If they would do it, right? But it doesn't. Well, it gives you the better chance of victory is scoring more goals than the opposition, which I know seems like a really stupid, obvious thing to say, but the only way you're going to do that is if you're attacking. You're not going to do that by defending and hope you get a chance, because you're always likely to concede. Now,
and also, given the way we've been so wasteful with chances, I wouldn't like us to switch to a method that reduces the number of chances we get, because we're not going to take the ones we get then. Especially
when you consider that sort of mould of playing usually relies on a set piece. You know, big strikers, that kind of thing. And I was having a conversation with the other night about it with Big Eddie, if you're watching. And he was talking about the Barcelona game, the famous one, when we beat them 2-1. And it was back to the wall, and it was an amazing night, and everybody remembers it. But nobody remembers the performance, you remember the result.
Yeah.
But you also remember that we never done anything that season.
Yeah.
You know, so you get these results in isolation, it's great, but did we improve as players? No.
No, and if you look at the lineup, it's not a lineup that you would ever say was full of Celtic greats. I think we had Miku and Lasad on the pitch at some point that night. Do you know what I mean? Like,
so the result. I mean, the result will something to remember forever. It will be, and it was amazing. Like, I'm not discounting any of it, but the point is, you know, if we played that way and we go to, you know, the last stages of Champions League playing that way, you would say, right, that's probably how we need to do it. But we played that way a bunch of times, and we occasionally got a result. That's no progress. The only way we're going to get progress is, and I think it's the way. It's not just about Ange, it's about how we're playing and how I think we need to play. And the better we get at that, and the more we play that way. And I know no one likes comparing it, but if you look at Ajax, they've been playing the same way for 60 years, and that's why they can get a guy at 19 and just pluck him straight in, because he knows how they're going to play. Everyone knows how they're going to play, and they do that all the time, and they get better and better and better. Salzburg are the same. The guy that's in charge of Leipzig was in charge of Salzburg when they beat us, and they beat us soundly under Brendan Rodgers. 51 minutes, Brendan Rodgers collection. But it's that idea of progress is better. And again, I defy anybody to tell me that any of those games were entertaining to watch. Like, the 2 games against Leipzig were brilliant to watch.
Yeah.
Right, the result didn't go away, but they were great games of football. They really were.
I'm also pretty convinced Leipzig are going to give somebody a fright in the round of 16 as well.
They're looking excellent. I see their gaffer's tremendous. I wanted him for a Celtic job after Rodgers, actually, but that's neither here nor there. So again, I think you're always right. It's always good to be brave and see how you go on. And if you're going to get beat, you know, there's no point in sort of whimpering out. You just go in there, swing for the wind. Hope you land, but to cower in the corner and just take a down and hope you get one lucky punch, it's not good to anybody. So I totally agree with the approach, and yeah, again it keeps coming back to it. I know we keep talking about it, but if a chance would have felt is if we'd have converted a wee bit better, who knows where we'd have been.
Yeah,
I think that's one of the fact we're creating chances and playing well is more important than, maybe not more important than the results in the long term, but certainly at this stage in a sort of European development, I think it's fair.
One of the things I spoke to Paul John about on the match coverage the other night, a point that I made was, you know, we've all talked about this bravery and coming out swinging and all that, which I think is great against the big superpowers, against the Real Madrids of the world. But where I think we can have an impact and where we should be aiming to have an impact is against your Shakhtars and those types, who are still a little bit ahead of us, but are reachable. How far away from that kind of a level do you think we are? Or does that go back to the discussion we were having at the start of the show about being regularly in the Champions League? Is that what we need to match those types of teams?
So the latter part of your answer is right in that we need to keep being in to progress to get there. But in terms of Shakhtar specifically, the difference between the team was a couple of goals.
And one very special player as well.
I mean, we should have won both those games. So that's a wee bit disappointment. But again, it's the same story. It's just a bit more clinical. We'd have got it. So if we're in this position next year against a team like that, I would expect more. And again, you say that the boy Mudryk is sensational. You know,
it's funny. Like, I can't remember the last time it happened, but it's one of those situations where you're gutted, but you also feel as if you're witnessing the birth of a superstar. Like, there'll be people who don't know about him yet because they've not faced him. and are going to come up against them in the next 18 months or 2 years, and we'll be like, ah, yeah, he tore us apart at Celtic Park 2 years ago, and we knew then. That's the kind of thing I think he's about. I could see him being massive in the years to come.
Yeah, definitely. But what we have to hope for is that we start either producing players like that or signing guys at 19, 20 and playing them. Because I think as well, the not to go on a negative, not on a Friday because it's Friday and that's not the crack, but I think one of the things we should be doing, this player model of signing younger players and developing them is great, but when you sign out 23, 24, they're not that young, they're not going to get that much better. They will improve, but you've got a limited window, and then you have them 3 years and then they want a big move somewhere else because they're getting towards their 30s.
Yeah.
So you have to be signing guys at 18 looking to play them, I think, 18, 19. No, you can't have a full team like that, right? But you're spinning the team and then surrounding these really talented guys around it, because that guy Mudryk's been playing for them for, I think, 3 years, and he's only just turned 21. So that's when you start to get and develop. And we need to be better at that as a club, whether it's transfers or some of the, I know the youngsters are never a great standard at the moment, but over the coming years, I think that's a kind of long-term vision for us. So I hope that at some point, even if we're maybe kind of been about the group stage, last stages, Europa League, wherever we get to in our European progression, every season or two, somebody can be signed for us and go, oh, there's a superstar, there's X amount of money. Remember, he was at Celtic. And that's the type of thing I'd like to see for us as well.
Yeah. It's an interesting point that you raise as well about this identifying young players and trying to keep a hold of them. It was something I actually said on the bulletin last week, I think, as well. This idea that instead of becoming a club where they are a stepping stone and we turn over these players as quickly as we do, what I would like to see is for us to hold on to them for a few more years, just to give us a chance to have a real assault on the Champions League with top quality players of the likes of Jota, of the likes of Van Dijk back in the day, of the likes of O'Reilly and Hatate, that we keep them for a little bit longer before they move on to bigger and better things. Is that realistic, or is it just the nature of the beast with us that we're going to have to make do with what we have?
Yes and no. Again, it goes back to the previous point there. If they're here younger and they're playing week in week out at 18 or 19, they're more inclined to stay till they're 21, maybe 22, get 3 or 4 good years at them, and then go on. But if you get them at 25, 26, and they've got a chance to go into like not a bigger club, but certainly a richer one, they're less likely to stay, right? So Matt O'Reilly, who I think is going to be a superstar, he might stay for another full season next season. Yeah. If he's only 21, he might think, well, let's go another Champions League run, see where I'm at, and if I need to develop, he can go somewhere at 22, and he's still 14-year career left.
Or even you look at the timeline of Greg Taylor, I sometimes forget just how young he still is. I mean, we've had him for a good 3 years at this point, and he's only, I think, 25 now. I mean, if we could identify players and have them in that bracket at a time, then it might be a bit more useful to us. I think you say,
the player profile as well, Laura, because if you get guys like Greg Taylor, he's been excellent for us this season, so I promise this isn't a dig, but he's unlikely to get a massive move, probably, right? If we're honest. He's been excellent for us. He absolutely has, and he shut a lot of people up, and that super proud of him. But guys like him, like Callum McGregor, probably won't go. James Forrest, as good as he's been for us, was never really up for a big move. There's certain players that probably won't move. It's just the certain key individuals that when you get in, we're not going to have this guy along. I think Neil Lennon said after I think the first or second training session with Van Dijk, he just said, this guy's not going to be here, for very long because he's too good. And you get these guys in, and if you've got a core squad like, as I say, Greg Taylor's, Callum McGregor's, Carter Vickers, Ralston's, etc., and then you surround them with sort of younger, potential superstars. If you're selling them regularly and building them in, there's still a coherency in the squad. So I think, if we can get them in a bit younger, we get more time with them just by extension. But when you start buying guys at 23, 24, you're never going to get long, because chances are if they're good enough, they're going to go for big money.
Yeah, I think that's fair. To close out the show, we've obviously got the match tomorrow against Dundee United. Celtic Park, 3 o'clock kickoff against one of the teams at the bottom of the table. What kind of scoreline are you looking for? How do you think we'll go on tomorrow?
Well, we scored 9 against them last time, so it'd be nice to get 10, but the clamour for the number 10 is cost us in the past, so I'll just say I'll go with 4-0.
Excellent. I would like to see a 4-0 and a nice spread of the scorers would be good. Just because
a nice spread, I'm going to go away and look at my Cliff Richard calendars, I think.
Well, before you do that, I want to end on this really positive note from Lawrence McNeil. There is no way a Scottish team can compete regularly in Europe. If they did, they would be picked apart by bigger, richer teams and the manager would probably leave. Have to accept it. Happy Friday, everybody. Hope you enjoyed that one. We shall see you next week. Brian, thank you very much. And please join us for the match coverage over the weekend, as always.